And we're live. Good evening, everyone. And tonight on Paranormal Path Peeps, we have Penny Griffiths Morgan. How are you doing?
Oh yeah, it's a bit
Got
of a
that wrong?
mouthful, isn't it?
And how's Lois doing?
Lois is fine, just choked up with the cold. Absolutely choked up with the cold.
Oh,
So, but I'm still here, still looking half dead.
You did have a good investigation the other night, didn't you?
Oh, I had a brilliant investigation the other night. I had a scary experience, but a really good investigation. It was fun and games from the beginning to the end.
It's so
where
cool
were
living
you?
in Scotland.
Where were you, Lois?
I was at a castle and just up the road from me, so it's not really that far. So it was really good. Um, and me and Jacqueline had been there before when Jacqueline came to Scotland. It's one of the places that I took her to.
Cool.
It's a
So
special
it was
place, it
definitely
really
it was a
is.
good night.
Cool.
And I went out, no using equipment. My whole experiment was because obviously I do development classes and I haven't been there before. I would say November. It was my way to try to get back into the rhythm air.
Mm-hmm.
So I told the guys at my team, you know what, I'm not taking out any equipment. I'm just going myself, and what a night! What a night!
Cool. Something to be said for that, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Okay, so if we sort of start the show and sort of ask where it all started for you, when was the first time that you witnessed something paranormal or even thought that there was something else around you?
Do you know what? It's so long ago. I can't really remember because I've believed in it since I was little. One memory I have at my parents' house where I grew up in Norfolk. Um, it's in the middle of nowhere, and it's quite a modern house. It was built in the 60s, and my dad used to work away from home, and I remember it was like midweek. My little sister, my mum, myself, our dog were all sitting in the living room, and we had a glass living room door. And I saw a shadow of a person walk past the door in the hallway and go up the stairs, and I heard the sound of the stairs creaking.
Wow.
And I remember I must have only been like 5, 6, something like that, because I ran out thinking my dad had come home and to surprise us.
Yeah.
There's no one there. That's happened more than once. And it wasn't like the road outside. If you saw a car along it, it was normally because the A11 was shut. Though nobody used this road because it's kind of it's a tiny road. There's only 3 houses on it, and
All
nobody
right.
would ever use it. So it wasn't like reflection from traffic light, from headlights or anything like that. Frequently, I would hear my sister and I would hear footsteps on the landing, footsteps on the stairs, and there's no one there. In fact, fast forward sort of 35, 40 years, my husband's heard them. And he said he always thinks it's one of our kids has got up in the middle of the night. He goes out to check and there's no one there, and he's heard them. So it's not just me.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so there's something going on there. But we found out a few years ago that one of the first ever Methodist chapels had been built in the grounds where my parents' gardens are.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
And it was a timber built one that was only there for a very short while before it kind of was pulled down. And we don't know. I don't know if that's what is causing it. I've never really investigated it because my sort of it's not really fair on my parents because they haven't given me permission, and I'm not going to go in there and
That's right.
they're sort of happy living there. But so from a very young age, but I think the biggest experience, one that I've talked about before, and I talk about a lot, is when I saw Tinkerbell, and there was this
Oh
old bar.
wow.
It wasn't Tinkerbell, but that's the only way I can describe it. I must
Wow.
have been 9, 10, something like that. My sister and I are out walking our dog, and there used to be this big old barn. It's actually been converted now, and it's very, very nice. But this big old barn, it was derelict, run, and we'd always dare each other to look through the broken panels in the
Yeah.
door. And this was a really sunny day, lovely weather, and no wind. And I remember looking through and seeing this light flying around. This is my naked eye flying around. And it would hover and then dart and then hover and then dart. And it hovered and darted straight towards my face where I was looking through the panels. And I was frozen to the spot. I couldn't move. And that's the only way I just couldn't move. And I can't explain it, even with the knowledge I have now. I can't explain what it was because we don't have glowing sort of insects in the UK, do we?
No, we don't.
No light. It was my naked eye, so I can't say it was an orb from a camera, all
Yeah.
that type of thing. And it was moving, and it wasn't. It was jerking in weird directions. It wasn't like on the air, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I just remember my sister and I sort of standing there like frozen. We actually couldn't move. It was like something had mesmerized us. And
Wow.
I'd always remembered that, never knew what it was. And I've always sort of had slightly prophetic dreams, and I've sensed things. I never thought anything of it. I just thought it was normal. That was me.
Yeah.
And then when I got into my 20s, when I decided I needed to be sensible and get a good job and get a mortgage, I kind of pushed it all to one
Yeah.
side. Didn't not believe in it, but didn't really have an interest in it, or tried to not have an interest in that side of things. And then it was when I was, oh crumbs, late 30s, or was I 40? I can't remember now. My youngest, who was a baby, and I was doing a night feed, and he would feed really slowly. So rather than wake my husband up, who had to get up for work in the morning, I'd take my baby boy down to the lounge, put the television on at 2 o'clock in the morning, key through things, see if I could find something to watch while he was feeding. And I found this show with these blokes talking in a really weird accent. And once I got to understand what the accent was, it was like, wow, you can do ghost hunting and you can like use gadgets and stuff. This is so cool. And it was Ghost Asylum with the Tennessee Wraith Chasers. And
Wow.
that's kind of, I think the next day I said to my husband, I want to have a go at this. And he said, go for it. And it went from there.
Yeah.
So whilst I've only been investigating sort of 8-9 years, the interest and the sort of knowing that something is out there that I can't explain has been around for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
But yes,
Isn't it intriguing though? Once you get that bug, you just can't get away from it.
well, it's all down to the Tennessee Wraith Chasers, and I have actually told them this.
Yeah.
And quite a few of them have been on my podcast. And I remember when I started Haunted Histories, somebody said, make a list of all your dream guests. And the boys from Tennessee Wraith Chasers were my dream guests. And I got them on I think it was about 2 years in. And now I'm going to be on the same bill as them at a paranormal event. And I'm a bit like,
awesome. Yay! Oh my God. That's just so fantastic.
so
But
there you
does
go.
that not always happen when?
Pardon?
Obviously, does that not always happen? Well, I find that like I hadn't been out for ages, and when I was out on Saturday, I was like, oh, in my element. I was like a big child. I was like, oh my God, and it is. See once you like start the paranormal and obviously get out, you absolutely love it, and see when you haven't done it for that while, you absolutely miss it. And that's one of the things that I noticed, that absolutely I do miss it when I'm not out, and it drives me crazy.
I think because I do so much history
Mm-hmm.
as well, I can keep myself amused doing that side of things.
Yeah.
Because as a sort of a paranormal historian, I'm not just doing investigating. A lot of my work is researching the history around a place, researching events, seeing if I can find any historical validity to what people have experienced. And that is literally a case of burying myself in archives, whether they're online, whether I'm reading a book, whether I'm actually at a records office. And that kind of, yeah, that would keep me amused. If somebody said to me, you can only do one investigation a year, but you can do all the research you like, I'd probably be okay, because
Yeah.
you know, and during lockdown, I was actually writing my third book during the first big lockdown, and that caused an issue because I was supposed to be getting all these investigations done to write it, and I had to learn how to do all the online stuff and learn how to trawl records without going to a records office, and that kept me amused.
Did you not find that hard though, Penny? Because I know when I first ever worked with the first ever team that I had been with, and I wasn't using my senses at that time, that I found it so difficult. You could go into researching a place and you could find a lot of information, or you could go to another place and find very, very little on. How did you overcome that? Like,
Because I'm a tenacious little cow and I don't say.
Well,
Bless you.
One of the things that I am very lucky to have are a lot of contacts in all the
Yeah.
fields, whether it be the paranormal field, whether it be the history field, whether it be the just English, if you like, how to write field. And they know they can come to me when they're stuck, and I might know how to get them out of their particular trap, if you like, and I can do the same. And I've not cultivated those contacts from a sort of selfish perspective. I've cultivated because everyone has got something that you don't know, and if you've got an interest in a subject, women will reach out and find it out, because and and one of my goals when I set up Haunted Histories was to and I mean, I know Jacqueline's seen me present and probably would say that I am quite passionate about these subjects.
Yeah, definitely.
It was to stop people who are into the paranormal thinking history is boring and dusty and fuddy-duddy, and everyone who talks history is like and has like leather patches on their elbows and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But for people who are into history, not to look at people who are into the paranormal and think we're all completely and utterly woo-woo and think everything is a ghost. And I'm sort of getting there, because I've got, I've been on historians' podcasts. I do my podcast. I mean, the one I'm going to be recording this week, I'm not telling anyone what it's on because it's a surprise, but it's an actual historian. I've interviewed James Holland, who's a very well-known World War II historian. I've been on historians' podcasts talking about some of the history stuff and how it relates and how we work it with the paranormal. So, and I can't remember where I was going with this, but the point was I wanted to marry the two to make people realize they're not mutually exclusive. They work together, and to have respect for each other. So your point when you hit a brick wall with research, I am normally the person people will turn around to and go, Penny, do you know have you any ideas?
Yeah.
And I sometimes I do have to go hands up and say that's as far as I can get. But normally I can find out something that other people didn't know. I mean, I've done that with the new book. Actually, I found out something about one of the baronets, and the historical society told me you'll never find anything about him. There's nothing exists. Well, I have, and I found out something that's never been published.
That's brilliant.
Well, when you upset people or make people happy, and I'm not sure which is going to be right now.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely yes, it's very intriguing. So I guess, is it time to mention this then?
What, the new book?
Yeah.
Do you want the exclusive? This has never been seen by anyone bar my family and the designer, the wonderful Mr. Andy Saw of Haunted Magazine. Who would like to see the cover of my new book coming out in March?
Yay! Come on, let's see.
Over to you, Jacqueline.
Yeah. We're just doing the share, and we're just trying to find it.
This is my fourth book. When Andy designed the cover, he said this is a bit different to what you're used to, and I loved it. And in fact, everyone in my family who I've shown loved it. And obviously you've seen it, you loved it. It's something a bit different for me, but I absolutely blooming love it.
Yeah. I'm just trying to share it. You know how I did it earlier, and it was easy.
You did. Let me see if I can share. I see if I can share, because I've got a copy of it as well.
I'm so trying to find it. It's disappeared off my windows, even though I can see it.
I can't even share mine now.
It's not giving me the opportunity, which is annoying.
Let's see. Sharing. Share. No, that's the wrong. Well, I'll keep. Well, you try and work out how to do it.
Yeah, I'll try again.
It's
being a bit.
No, it won't share for me. It won't only let me do the slides.
See, that's why I'm so glad I'm not on that side, because I would muck it up. I mean, when Jacqueline was doing the pantomime, I was in panic mode because I didn't know how to do it, and then I was losing sleep thinking, oh my god, I'm so going to mess this up. I'm not even going to do it right.
Well, I'll keep talking whilst Jacqueline's trying to get the slide to share. So, the new book, which is due out, here we go.
Hey,
Woo! Wow, that's
that's
neat.
Oh,
brilliant.
wow. There's so
Wow.
many of us.
That doesn't kind of work, does it? We'll stop sharing.
That was nice. I like that though.
That's kind of an effect, isn't it?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, I'm not even sure if. No, I can't
So
drag.
yeah, I can't share at the moment because I've lost all my windows.
Let's see if this works. Don't show this. Share a screen. Window.
Hi, Dennis. How you doing?
There we
pal?
go. Can you all see that?
No.
Can you see the Bosworth Hall thing?
No.
It's told me it's sharing it.
Oh, what a nightmare. Let's try
Oh,
again.
I don't know what's going on then.
No, it's being oh, I've got it. I've got it. I found it. Yay.
There we go.
Yay!
That is the new cover of my new book that is due out in March called The Battle for Bosworth Hall. It's being released in conjunction with the Festival of the Unexplained, which is taking place at Bosworth Hall from the 11th to the 13th of March. There are still tickets available. I think there's still day tickets and possibly weekend tickets, but the ticket that includes the history tour with me, I'm afraid, on the Friday have sold out, I believe. But you
But
can
it
still.
will be wonderful. Your history tour will be awesome.
Thank you. Well, they're going to
Well.
2 locations, and I'll be doing the tour at one of them because the other one's got official guides there. But then I'll also be opening the event on the Saturday with the first talk of the weekend, which is like I'm going to be absolutely shattered come Saturday evening. And my talk will be on some of the things to do with Bosworth Hall, bits that are in the book and some bits that aren't in the book, so people get something extra if they're coming to buy a copy. So that will be when it's officially live, if you like, and people can buy it. So the forwards, I've got not just one, but 2 forwards in my new book.
Wow.
Andy and Paul from Haunted Magazine have both written a forward for me because it's their fault.
That's fantastic.
It's their fault that I discovered it. It was crumbs. It must have been about 4 years ago. I did one of my early Haunted Histories podcasts, and they asked to talk about Bosworth Hall. And I found some information out for them that they didn't know that kind of didn't freak them out, but shocked them a bit because it gave some credibility to some of the experiences they'd had, some of the names they'd had come through.
Wow.
And they always said, "Oh, you should write a book about it." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll put it on my list," because I actually have a list about 5 or 6 books I'm going to write, sort of different subjects.
Brilliant.
But I'm not like people like Richard Estep and Mike Cravell. I can't write 2 or 3 of them.
Wow, yeah.
I can only write one at a time. I kind of have an idea for them all, getting ready, but I can't do loads all in one go. I have to focus on one and get that one done. But I'm writing blogs and articles and everything else around them. And then when I was asked to do the Festival of the Unexplained, I sort of said, why don't I try and do this as my next book?
Yeah.
And then you can have it for the festival. And that's really where it came from. So the book looks at the history of Bosworth Hall, some of the hauntings, everything else. But you can't talk about Bosworth without talking about the Battle of Bosworth Field, where Richard III was beaten by the usurper, Henry Tudor. So it got a bit about that in there as well. And we've also got a bit about some of the other places in Market Bosworth, which are kind of linked to the Dixies, who were the family who originally built and owned Bosworth Hall until ABCD had to sell it to pay for his gambling debts. But then there's also some sort of paranormal experiences. A few people have written their experiences for me. Jane Rowley's written some bits. Chris Wilcox has written some, obviously Paul and Andy.
Brilliant, yeah.
So there's other accounts in there as well of stuff that's happened to people. So I think when my editor Lucy read it and sent back to me, another cracker of a read. So hopefully people will enjoy it.
So what number book is this, Penny? 4th?
4th. It's my 4th. Yeah.
It's brilliant. Yeah.
Just started writing now.
I kind of went to Bosworth, Battle of Bosworth area. Then I went to the hall, and I picked up links sort of between the two for investigation. And yeah, it's a brilliant place.
Well, they do
Um,
believe that the troops would have marched past what became. I mean, Bosworth Hall itself wasn't. It was the land itself wasn't owned by the Dixies until the early 16th century.
yeah,
It wasn't actually built until later than that. So, but they do believe that I'm pretty sure it was Richard's troops went through Bosworth, because when they did the procession to take Richard III's body back to Leicester
yeah,
Cathedral, they did go through Bosworth because that would have been the route he would have taken. So there is a link. And even though the Battle of Bosworth Field wasn't actually in Market Bosworth, it's only about the Bosworth Field Memorial sort of site and
yeah.
Heritage Museum is only about 2.5 miles away.
That's
So
it.
it is all in a similar, and there would have, the troops were spread pretty wide.
Yeah,
It wasn't all in one sort of tiny little swimming pool sized area. So they do believe that the troops would have walked through Market Bosworth to get to the battlefields. So there is a link there, and they are intrinsically linked, but there is also an amusing story, which I will tell you as a bit of a spoiler if you want to hear it. Some people
yeah,
may know this, but the fourth Baronet, Walston Dixie, who's the one who's meant to have murdered his daughter by her foot getting caught in a man trap,
right.
he was a bit of an arrogant prat, I think is the only word to call him. And he was meeting with the royal family, and the then Queen turned around to him and said, she was foreign, and she said, "I'd heard of the Battle of Bosworth. It was a big battle." And he said, "Oh, sorry, I beat him. And she's like, "What you want about? You weren't." But he had a fist fight with another landowner, and it became nicknamed the Battle of Bosworth because they had a
Oh,
fist fight. And
Oh,
he was
wow.
so arrogant. He thought her talking about the Battle of Bosworth wasn't anything to do with the sort of loss of the Plantagenets on the throne and the taking over of the Tudors and everything. No, no, no. He thought it was about his fist fight he'd had with another landowner. So yeah, he was a bit of a wally. I think I'm being quite polite here, because the words I'd like to use to describe him probably would get you taken off air.
and we're
He
going out in the afternoon on things as well in the US.
I am trying to watch my language talking about Woolston Dixie. He wasn't
Oh, bless you.
misogynistic, sexist, pugnacious bully, I think would
Uh-huh.
be one way of describing him.
Yeah.
Some of the stories, the fact when his first wife was pregnant, he wouldn't let her leave the house, and he said it was because she was pregnant. At this point, he'd taken her former maid to court at Old Bailey in London, accusing her of stealing stuff from them when she
Oh,
hadn't. And the reason he did it was because he found she'd written a letter to his now wife saying, "Don't marry him, he's not good enough for you." So he took her to court and said she'd stolen stuff. And he wouldn't let his wife come and give evidence. He wouldn't let, I think it was like a 3-mile radius of the hall. He wouldn't let go any further than that. So that's the kind of man
yeah.
he was.
Narcissist.
Whether the
It's
man trap incident with his daughter is true, no one really knows.
Yeah.
But he did have a daughter who died at 19 who was called Anna. So
But
Yeah.
there is
yeah,
there. Going back in the sort of years, you'll find that sort of thing. You'll find that there's a lot of people with love childs that are no registered or things like that. Because I've came across that in a situation in a location, that I
yeah,
was trying to get into. That there was a a child that wasn't even registered.
it's very common. I mean, it's like researching people like Richard III and Edward IV. They all had love children,
Mhm.
illegitimate children, as they would have been called. No, the rumor is that his daughter was having an affair with like the gardener or something, someone who's below her status, and he forbade her to go there and sit. And she found out that he was setting a man trap, like a bear trap, in the woods to capture said boyfriend. She went out to warn him, accidentally stood in the trap herself, and ended up dying
Oh,
as a result. Now she's meant
Oh
to be
my
one of the
God.
ghosts of Bosworth Hall. She's meant to be called the Grey Lady, and
Wow.
her name was Anna, or Anne's. She's known as Dixie. Oh, what I'm saying is we don't know for sure if that's really how she died, but I
Yeah.
do know that his daughter, who was called Anna Dixie, died at the age that they say she died at through this man
Wow.
trap, but we don't know how she died, because in the 1700s, cause of death wasn't really noted down. But we do know she did die at the age of 19, and her name was Anna Dixie. So, and there are supposedly, there's a portrait that people think is her, and she is dressed in grey. So
Okay.
that's what I say. We don't know if that's where people have got the idea that she's the grey lady.
Yeah, that's it.
But certain bits of it, yes, he did have a daughter, his first wife, the one who was pregnant, who he took the maid to court and blah, blah, blah. He had 3 wives in the end. They kept dying on him. I think it was trying to escape, to be quite honest, because I
Yeah.
wanted to be married to him.
Yeah.
But he, so we don't know for sure if that is what happened to him, but we do know that he had a daughter who died at the age that the legend says, and there's a portrait of her that they think is her, just in grey.
Yeah, it is a beautiful hall, and it's lovely grounds as well, isn't it?
The grounds are beautiful, although I will say I get very, I have to bite my tongue when I'm in these places, because my husband and I went there back in June, and we were exploring, and we found the beautiful water tower with all the buildings at the bottom.
Yes, been there at night.
It's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there's a big plaque in front of it that tells you what it was, that it was a
Yeah.
water tower. This bloke is standing there with his kids saying, oh, this is where they would have stabled the horses for the hall, blah, blah, blah. And he's English as well, so you'd think he could have read. And I'm standing there, my husband's just got my arm. He's got his grip on my arm going, don't say it. And I'm going, I don't even have to act like I know it all. I can just say, just read. And yeah, I do get, sometimes the husband will just grab my arm and pull me away when he hears people saying stuff that he knows is incorrect, because he knows I'm going to go, and yeah. Sometimes he doesn't get to me in time, and I walk away thinking they probably didn't want to know that. I've just made them look a bit stupid. But when he's saying that, oh, there, that would have been the stabling, and there's a plaque right there that tells you what it was, and it's just like,
Yeah, but it doesn't even look like a stable block by any bit of anyone's imagination.
I mean, it is an ornate water tower. I'll give it
Oh,
that.
it's very beautiful,
Victorian,
yeah,
and the Victorians liked ornate. I think the
That's
thing
it.
is on the other side where you've got the building and then a great big gap of land and then the arch.
Yeah.
I mean, we were looking at it going, but there's some original old black and white pictures in the hotel that you can see that show that it did used to have almost like it wasn't corrugated iron, but it was kind of, the arch was connected to the rest of the building at one point, but obviously that material, maybe it was asbestos and stuff, possibly would have been, was taken down. But yeah, we're on the other side, and there is this big thing that tells you exactly what it was and what it was used for, when it was built, and this guy's going on about it being stabling, and I'm just like,
oh no.
But yeah, my husband, bless him, he has to sort of, because he could see my face go, and he knows that means Penny's going to jump in and correct someone and try to stay away.
But the church there is wonderful as well, isn't it?
Beautiful, isn't it? We did because we cut through the church to go to, because we went to the Red Lion pub for our dinner each night, which is a lovely old pub. It's beautiful there.
Not even found that yet.
Oh, you just cut through the churchyard. You cut through the churchyard up a side street, and it's on the main. You have to book if you want to eat there, because it gets really, really busy. But the owners have got this amazing long-haired German Shepherd who I fell in love with. They only let her come in at the end of the evening, because she's big and a lot of people are scared of her. And when my husband's going, German Shepherd, and I'm like, where? Because I love shepherds. And I was like, please, can I give her a cut? Oh, she had the thick fur that you just disappear in. That kind of really she's beautiful. She's beautiful. And they said, do you want to give her a treat? And I was like, yeah. And they went, make her do something. I was like, yes, I know. You don't just give them a treat. They've got to do something. Anyway, lovely food, lovely atmosphere, beautiful old pub. But yeah, so we'd cut through the church graveyard to get to there. And me being me, I like looking at the graves. I like reading out their names.
Oh, I do.
Especially ones who've died a long time ago, because it's a way of remembering them and sort of saying, there's people still here. We still care. Whereas my husband's like, can we get through here as quickly as possible? Quickly as possible. And I'm like, mate, there's nothing here. You're fine. You're absolutely fine. And so the second time we went through it, he was a bit more, I'll trust you. I'll trust you. And he started reading out names as well. So yeah, it's just a lovely little town.
It is. It really is.
We're actually going back. We're staying somewhere else. We're staying at the Dixie Arms at the end of the month for our sort of wedding anniversary.
That's
night. and I'm quite looking forward to that because that's a really old coaching inn. I think it was 15 something that one was built.
Wow.
But it's just such a lovely little town. It's just so pretty.
Oh, it's a lovely area because I went to Neil Packer's party.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually stayed at Boswell, and yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. So after the party, me and a friend decided to walk around the grounds
Mm-hmm.
and see what we could pick up and around the churchyard and everything. And yeah, he actually got a voice as well. He heard a lady's voice. And
yeah,
and the children running. It's beautiful and
it
brilliant
is
what
lovely.
we got.
It's a lovely place.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I think it could do with a bit of money being spent on it at points.
Yeah.
It's not being. It could be nicer, but just
it happens, doesn't it?
It does, but just looking at
that's the problem. They don't. You have the most beautiful buildings, and this goes not just for Scotland, England, but across the world. You've got loads of beautiful like places.
Yeah.
That sadly go to the dogs, and that's the only one way to describe it. They're beautiful buildings, but they're not maintained, and they just rot, and it's such a shame to see because they could be beautiful places.
I always find with the history side of things, you go to somewhere like America, and I'm not knocking anyone here, by the way. This is just an observation. You go to America and they'll have something that's 80 years old, and they treat it like it's the most precious thing. It's this really old. It's really old. It was built in 1920, and you're like, 1920. I've got books older than that. Then you go to and they you don't touch this, you don't do this. They've got people there making sure it doesn't get damaged and stuff, and it's less than 100 years old.
Yeah.
You go to places in the UK and they've got stuff that's 200 years old, and it's like, yeah, you can lean on that, you can touch that, you can touch that bit, you can do that.
No respect.
Because we've got stuff that's 1,000 years old, so we protect the more. That's modern almost to us, 200 years old.
Yeah.
Then you go to somewhere like Greece, and you're clambering over ruins that are 2,000 years old, and they're not worried about the stone being eroded. They're not worried about it being touched because they've got stuff that's even older. And it's Wes has just said, at least I said America and not Canada. I know, you see, I thought you might be watching Mr. Coleman, so I thought I wouldn't say anything about the Canadians. Love you. But it just makes me laugh that you see this like ancient history in some countries, but because they've got so much of it, they don't care. And yet other countries, they're lucky if they've got something that's 100 years old. It's going to be very funny seeing guys like the Wraith Chasers coming over, who I know a couple of them have never been to the UK. And we were saying, yeah, one of the pubs we'll go, well, I'll take you to, it's about 600 years old. And they're like, what? And it's a pub? And I'm like, yeah. They're kind of, it's like the hall we're staying in. I say it's not that old. It's sort of built 17th century. What? I said, it's not that old. There's older ones than that. It's just so brilliant to see people's reaction. Yet when I've been to like Rome, and I was like, when was this built? Oh, 500 AD or 50 AD, and you get that.
But that must make you sad, Penny. Sorry.
It is Penny.
When you go to these places, Penny, and people do have that attitude as well. Oh, it's just a building, or it's just a castle, or whatever.
It does, but I actually will place some of the criticism on that on the heritage people who are running the places, because they don't bring it alive enough. If you bring a place to life to people who visit it, they will respect it. I mean, it's like we love Yorkshire, even though we live down south. We love North Yorkshire. It's where my husband and I go to recharge, if that makes sense. It's the minute we seem to be going up the A1 and go past sort of Sheffield, and that's so we suddenly go, because it's like we'll move up there one day. We've already decided this.
Brilliant.
And we went at half term back in October, and so got English Heritage membership. It's like, right, we're going to visit every single castle we can up here that's English Heritage, whether the kids like it or not. They can run around the grounds like lunatics. Tire them out. We can get our history filled. And we went to Midland Castle. It's one of the ones we went to. And I've never been to Midland, but I'm a horsey person. So seeing all the race horses coming through the centre of the town, like hundreds of them, I was like in heaven. And then
I love that. Yeah.
And the age of everything. And this castle, even though everyone's got this really bad view of Richard III, this castle has an amazingly nice vibe to it, in my view. It's really peaceful. It doesn't feel like anything nasty went on there. I know his wife died. I'm pretty sure his wife died there. His son died there, but it doesn't feel like someone as nasty as people paint Richard III to be was there, if that makes sense. Anyway, my boys were sort of clambering around, so I started telling them some stories about medieval England, just basic ones. And because they were so interested, they started doing things like, rather than climbing on the stones, they'd put their hand on it to see if they could feel the vibration of the stone. And it's that. So I kind of think it's the guides. If you get a good guide and a person who genuinely loves the place, people will have more respect for it. But yes, I do think it's a shame that people look at these ruins and like, pfft. It's like when you go somewhere like Kenilworth Castle. That's one of my favourite places.
That's one of my favourite. It's beautiful.
And when I was when my husband and I went there, I mean, he loves history. He's not as into it as I am, but he loves it, and he will always listen to me and everything else. And when we went to gosh, it's about 15, 16 years ago we went, and I was telling him all about it. And I was saying about the fact he built those quarters just for Elizabeth I, and people think he was having an affair with her, which I think he possibly was. And the fact that, there's rumours that he killed his wife because then he thought he'd be free to marry Elizabeth. And his wife was actually from Norfolk. She was from Wyndham, which is 3 miles up the road from where I grew up.
Wow.
And all this kind of stuff. And you get people listening, and this happens to me a lot. I get people listening to me going, I never knew that. They don't tell you that in the guidebook. Well, no, but they should, because some people want to learn the dates and the figures and who was who, but some people want to know the stories. And these stories are true stories. All right, we don't know if he killed his wife deliberately. There's some people that say she slipped and fell down the stairs. There's some people actually think she had cancer and she did it to herself deliberately because she knew she was dying.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. But if you tell people these stories and you bring this place to life, because what's more, I mean, history is one giant soap opera at the end of the day.
Well,
and if you can verbalize that, people will want to learn more because you get addicted to soap operas.
Yep.
So that's why I say I blame sometimes the heritage people for being too dusty and fuddy-duddy and thinking people don't want to hear these stories. They do. And that's how you bring these places to life, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah, when I last went to it, they had two gentlemen and they're like fighting like back in the day, and they're like dressed up and they're having a conversation about something what had happened. So, people can view it. They've got the right setting around them.
Yeah.
So it makes it feel right, and you just get more of a gist of it, don't you?
I think so.
Because you go around and you're listening to these headphones where they're talking about something. It doesn't always bring it to life.
No.
You find bits out, but it's not always. You kind of want more, don't you?
Well, I think some people don't. I mean, I like both, if I'm completely honest. But then I like finding the stories out myself. That's me being a researcher and a historian and everything else. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't annoy my husband I do this, but it annoys my eldest son. When I go somewhere, I was like, any ghost stories then? Any hauntings? You experienced anything? And invariably, they'll talk to me about it. But he's like, oh, Mum, stop asking. It's really embarrassing. But then as soon as I connect the story, is it haunted? Did you get anything? And normally I was chatting to the manager at Richmond Castle, and she was telling me all about the cells that are there that POWs were in, like conscientious objectors. And Wes is right. Kirsten Honey, brilliant. Her love and her attachment to Bob in jail is amazing. And they are very, very lucky to have someone like her, talking Bobbin and the area and everything else. She is phenomenal. But she started telling me all the stories about the conscientious objectors, and we were talking about, they were known conchies from World War One, and she was amazed that somebody knew about them. And I was like, well, I'm a bit of a historian. I've written articles on the conscientious objectors and stuff. And she was saying the reason she knew about them because she went to a Quaker school. They were taught about them because a lot of conscientious objectors were Quakers because they don't believe in violence. And we were talking, and she was like, "Oh, I so wish I could get you in the cells, but I'm not allowed to." Because they only the people who are conserving them are allowed in there because they've got loads of drawings on the walls, and the walls are
Right.
whitewashed, and it's peeling because it's so damp.
Mm.
And so they're trying to work out a way of preserving it for future generations. But I wouldn't have known any of that if I hadn't talked to her. So, and I was like, why don't you give this energy to other people? And she went, because people don't ask. And I'm just like, it's yeah. But frequently when I mean, when we got married in Mexico, this is how much of a nerd and an arrogant nerd I am at that. We got married in Mexico. We wanted to visit the Mayan site. So you've got
Yeah, they're
Chichen
beautiful,
Itza,
aren't they?
Coba, and Tulum, because we were in Tulum. And we couldn't afford the $250 for a guide at each site. So
Okay.
bought $5 guidebooks for each site, and I memorized them.
Oh wow. That's
Again,
fantastic.
arrogant nerd that I am. Before children, I actually had a brain back then. And we were, I think it was Tulum. And I was telling my husband what the different things in the different buildings were, because they're all very different, all three sites. And I was explaining to him what it was and where it had come from and how old it was. And he went, turn around. And I turned around, I had about 10 people following us, thinking I was a tour guide.
Fantastic.
I'm just a punter. I'm here on holiday. I just happen to be good at memorizing this stuff, learning it. So there is that people want to know. They obviously want to know, but they don't know who to ask. So
yeah, like I went around Chichen Itza. We did have a guide, but then we were on our own. And
no, I didn't
you're
like
just
Chichen
looking at
Itza.
them.
I didn't like. It had a really bad vibe to me. It felt. It didn't surprise me the amount of executions.
Barbaric, isn't it?
Whereas Koba, which is in the middle of a big jungle,
the jungle, yeah,
I could have just sat and read a book for 3 hours and been quite happy. Whereas Chichen Itza, I felt very on edge.
There's something dodgy, yeah.
Yeah, it's dark. Tulum, completely different. But they all had different purposes. They weren't all the same thing. I mean, you've got a similar temple in Koba to what you have in Chichen Itza. The pyramid.
Kind of steep. It's different. Yeah,
but it's so similar designs, but different uses. But no, Chichen Itza. I remember before we went there, I was chatting to another lady we'd made friends with. She was from New York, and she said, if you're you're sensitive, you won't like Chichen Itza. She goes, you will smell death and fear, and she was right. I really, I loved it to be there, and I loved meeting some of the Mayans that we met, who were absolutely gorgeous.
Lovely, aren't they?
I mean, I love the Mexicans. I love the whole thing. No, I didn't climb to the top of Koba. I'm scared of heights. I'm scared of heights, but the husband, who's a roofer, did, and he took photos at the top. I stayed at the bottom because I knew I'd get stuck at the top. I wouldn't be able to get back down again. And he actually had to help a couple of people back down who froze. And because he's confident.
I get it.
Yeah. So no, I didn't climb to the top of it, but the husband did, because things like that don't faze him at all.
I stood on a smaller building at Lishmel, and sort of went up there, and there's only like 20 steps on a flat top.
Yeah.
I got on top and I couldn't get down because you've got to stand on like the edge of like a cliff, and
I can't do it. And I knew I couldn't. There was no point.
God.
And it amazed me that people were allowed to climb up those steps, but they wouldn't let them climb up Chichen Itza. And these steps at Koba are a hell of a lot worse.
But when I went, you could. They did allow you at Chichen Itza, and they had a metal chain.
No, you couldn't. When we went, they closed
metal chain and an ambulance at the bottom to catch people.
No, they closed. When was this? When did we get married? 2008.
Yeah, I went pre-1999.
Yeah, no, they closed it because apparently too many people had fallen and seriously injured themselves. So, but no, at Koba you can, but the state of the steps at Koba, I mean, I say the husband, he'd just run up and down them, literally. But then again, he runs up and down roofs that are like this. It doesn't faze him at all. But he had to help quite a few people get down because they got frozen. So yeah, I wasn't stupid enough to even try that, because I knew what I struggle. I mean, some of the castles we went to visit, my boys were like, come on, come up to the roof, Mum. And I'm like, okay. I froze. I literally would be holding the rampart like no, can't move. I can't move. I've got to go down. And and they're all like running around like loving it, and I'm like, nope, I'll see you down there. It's not.
You know what, Penny? I've totally got you back there, because on Saturday I was out with a team and I was out with another team, and we were kind of doing our own wee thing. Like, I was kind of going back to these stairs, and they're shortbread stairs. And my friend says, "Oh, you can go all the way up them." And I said, "Okay." And then Sam went up them, and then Liam went up them. But I only went so far, and I went, "Oh no, man, I can't do this." No, next year, in fact, sorry, no, even next year, this year, I'm jumping out a plane.
See, I can do that.
So I'm like, that's totally cool. I'm totally cool with the jumping out the plane thing. But it's all right, guys. I'll take Katie down here. But see, when they got up there, they actually took pictures, and it was a really, really beautiful view.
I've done aerobatics in an open top biplane. That doesn't faze me at all. But the thought of standing on the edge of something,
Yeah.
can't
I
do
do
it.
hot air ballooning.
I know.
That's kind of okay.
I think you and I discussed that. No. I
Yeah,
like
well,
when I'm flying
we
an
know why.
aeroplane.
We know why I've got an issue with hot air ballooning, but yeah, we won't mention that one.
Yeah, I mean,
Town centre.
I've flown gliders. I mean, so they don't have an engine, but to me, the logic behind how you fly them, and you can actually kind of emergency land a glider if you want to quite easily. No, hot air ballooning hang gliding has never appealed to me. Hot air ballooning has never appealed to me. But anything to do with an actual aeroplane,
yeah.
If someone says to me, "Do you want to come up in my aeroplane?" I'll be, yeah. And like, I love it because I've been doing it so long. But no, I heights, Cobra, and it doesn't surprise me people have died on Cobra. That really doesn't, because, like I say, there was a couple that my husband had to help down because they couldn't get down.
The steps aren't even a width of a foot, are they? Now, I've got a size 4 foot, and the steps aren't even that width.
I think if he hadn't been a roofer,
they get down them.
Yeah, if he hadn't been a roofer and used to literally walking up and down like sheer tiles, which he is, he may not have been as nimble as he was. But it's fascinating. But as I say, I kind of memorized these guidebooks. So yeah, it's like I say, I'm an arrogant nerd. I'm a nerd and I'm arrogant. I can't help it.
Penny, is there anything when you've been researching that shocked you? Like, either funny or like, oh wow, that wasn't what I was expecting.
Oh, always. There's always something that makes me go, oh. Even when you're looking at a family census and there's 19 children, and you think, it's telling me you got a headache. Or one recently, I've just found that the guy was 85 and his wife was 53. And you're thinking, lucky old him. Some of the newspaper articles you read, I mean, you kind of read stuff and you just think, really, did they really think that? Yeah, I mean, I probably I'd say not so. I'm quite unshockable now because I've seen so many things. But every so often I find things out, and I mean, finding out that Wollstonecraft took his wife's maid to court for stealing, because of the fact that she had written a letter saying she didn't think she should marry him because he wasn't worth it. That you just think, oh my God, you wouldn't think of someone doing that. Myself, I wouldn't, but he did. I think the thing is with history, everything you think of the worst horror film, I guarantee I can find you something in history that's real that's worse.
Wow.
So you kind of almost have to be unflappable. But when I've been writing an article about the Greek Civil War recently and some of the stuff that happened in there. And bear in mind, that was only in the late 1940s. And to find out that Britain actually was promoting the right-wing Greek government to kill communists, that made me go, that's embarrassing. That is not what I'd have expected. Just they're beating the Nazis and then the right-wing government come in. And because the British are so blooming scared of communism, they help fund them. And things like that just makes you go, well, that's in living memory for a lot of people. So things like that. I mean, even if you look at something even more modern, like the ethnic cleansing in Srebrenica and things like that happened in what the
Yeah.
90s. That
Yeah,
makes
all of what happened there.
I mean, I had a friend who was it with the UN who was out there, and he sort of said that the fact that their hands were tied and they weren't allowed to do anything, and you'd go into these buildings after hundreds of people had been burned to death, women and children,
Yeah.
and he was one of those Jack the Lad army boys, like nothing. He couldn't talk about it. He'd cry because of his experiences. That's shocking. So there are lots of things I read about that I have to almost put my personal emotions to one side because you can't have emotions when you're doing the history side. And it's really hard. But yes, so yes, there are things that some things I just have a chuckle, like the guy with the wife who's 30 odd years younger than him. And
He's done well on that.
And other things like that. But I think with history, you kind of have to not be shocked anymore because a lot of it is so, how do we do that to each other? You know, or how does, I mean, it's like, take Richard III. People have painted him as this villain.
Yeah.
Yet, doing the research I've done on him recently, I don't think he was. I think he's been painted.
Something's come up in the paper as well, hasn't it?
It's there's been quite a bit just recently again.
Yeah.
But I don't think he was the villain he was painted to be. I think that was Tudor propaganda to justify them taking over the throne when they only had a very, very tenuous sort of link to it. But that's where you kind of have to almost have no emotion, because otherwise you think, well, he's supposed to have killed his two nephews who were like, what, 12 and 9, 13 and 10, whatever they were.
Yeah.
You should hate him for that. But it may not be true.
What happened?
So that's why I don't get shocked. Some things do, like I say, some things do make me go, oh, blimey. Oh, but it's why horror films don't faze me, because some of the stuff I read in textbooks, a lot worse.
Oh,
yeah, that's true.
I can imagine. I can only imagine, Penny.
We've actually got a question coming then. This is from Mark Reynolds.
Hi, Mark.
So what's your worst paranormal experience, or haven't you had one?
Haven't had one. I've never been scared.
That's cool.
Never. Actually, no, it's not strictly true. I have been scared twice. One was by a pigeon flying up in front of me at Bodmin Jail. Made me scream because I'm scared of birds. And the other time was by a guest on an investigation who lost the plot and was getting very aggressive and threatening people and everything else. They're the only two times I've been scared doing investigations. I have nothing has ever happened. I've been unnerved. Had times when I thought, I need to keep my wits about me here.
Yeah.
But I've never had anything happen that's made me full on. Like, I take every paranormal experience I have, and this sounds very sanctimonious, but as a bonus, as a benefit, as
yeah.
Do you get what I mean? I'm appreciative of everything that happens.
That's great. That's brilliant.
But yes, Mark, a pigeon. I'm scared of birds, and I was at Bodmin Jail, and I didn't think this pigeon was real, and I went near it, and it flew in front of me, and I screamed like a girl.
I've done that 3 times.
Oh, actually, no. Wes is correct. He did scare me at Bodmin. Cheers for that, Coleman. We did, and it was me, and it was Gaynor, and it was pitch black, and we didn't realise Wes was sitting in the corner, and he spoke, and we both jumped.
Yeah.
So, like I say, nothing paranormal has ever scared me, but people. Actually, it was one of my son's friends. He's really scared by ghosts and stuff. He said, "Oh, ghosts are really scary." I said, "Mate, I'm more scared of the living than I am of the dead."
That's
and
right.
I would stand by that. But yes,
that's a true saying, Penny.
Pardon?
That is actually a true saying. Be scared more of the human than the dead.
I'm more scared of the living than I am of the dead. Yes. So Wes, yes, he scared me and Gaynor. He made us both jump because we didn't realise he was sitting in this part of the jail, and he suddenly spoke. And I don't know if you've ever heard Wes speak, but he's got a very lovely, deep voice, and we just heard this voice speak, and we didn't know where it was coming from. It was pitch black. He's dressed in black, and we did both.
That's
squeal.
brilliant.
But
That's
the
fantastic.
deceased have never scared me. Not
What
yet,
about the
anyway.
mannequins everywhere? You sometimes go to places and there's mannequins. You just
Oh,
forget
they
they're
don't
there.
bother me. They make me laugh. I mean, Kelvedon Hatch is a nightmare for them. Kelvedon Hatch nuclear bunker, if you've ever been there, there's quite a few mirrors around and there's quite a lot of mannequins. And the mannequins, I
Right,
don't think have been changed since about 1992 when it was decommed. Some of them I mean, there's a Margaret Thatcher one which really has seen better days. I know people who are terrified of those sort of things, and I tend to, if I'm doing an investigation, I'll warn them where they are.
Yeah.
But the funniest one was I was doing an investigation there. It was a company event I was helping out with for another company who's no longer around, and he was a trainee investigator, and he said, and he heard a noise in one of the rooms behind him, and he said, "I'm going to go and check it out." And I went, "Are you sure?" And he went, "Yeah, I'm going to go and check it out." And he goes off all brave. And he wasn't brave; he was a squealer. And all of a sudden, you hear this, "Oh my!" from this room. We're like, "What the matter? What's the matter?" He went, "I've just seen an apparition." I opened the door. I went, "There's a mirror." And he'd seen himself in the mirror, but because it was dark, he thought it was an apparition. And he was literally sprinting out the So, yeah. But no, the mannequins just make me laugh. I mean, the dolls make me laugh. How I can see how some people could see them as being sort of malevolent, but those sort of things do make me chuckle because it just shows psychologically how much you can play with people's minds if you really want to.
Yeah, that's it. I've got a question here from Von Hunter then.
Yeah.
So, do you think there is a lot more shocks to come from the First and Second World War? A lot of the troops did not speak about the atrocities. My father was in a prisoner of war camp and never spoke a word about it. He was a very hard-faced man, but he would weep when it was mentioned.
Yes, there's always going to be more stuff coming up.
Yeah. But will it though? Because they didn't mention it. My mum-in-law, her dad was in, and he's in one of the Stalag camps as well. They would never speak about it.
They don't speak about it, but they would have possibly had interviews when they came back. There would have been evidence gathered. Now, not from everyone because there was too many, but there would have been some evidence gathered. Plus, the reason I say things will come out is there's an awful lot of World War II stuff that still hasn't been released. It's still under the Secrecy Acts. World War One, a lot of it is coming out now. But the problem we have with World War One is where a lot of World War One archives were stored, and I can't for the life of me remember the name of the street in London. Somebody may know this, but there was an awful lot of archives stored in London, and that was bombed and destroyed, which is why there's an awful lot of World War One service records which don't exist. And I can't for the life of me remember the street. So if anyone listening knows it, tell me, because that's bugging me. Obviously, with potentially 2,000 years worth of history to try and remember, I can't always remember everything. I know there was a street, it was where the archives were held, and it was bombed and burned, and a lot of the archives were destroyed, which is also why when you look for World War One service histories and stuff, some of them do have fire damage and water damage, and that's why. With World War II, get on Google, someone, please. Get on Google, because it's bugging me now. I can't do it. I'm being interviewed. Otherwise I would. What was I going to say? It could be Somerset, but I can't remember. My mind's just... But I know it definitely is the case. But with World War II, a lot of the records are still under the Secrecy Act. For example, my grandfather, both my grandfathers were in the RAF in World War II. Neither of them flew. One was a chef who actually was based in Canada for a while, working with the Arnold scheme pilots. A guy by the name of Hap Arnold pioneered this scheme of training pilots up in Canada. And the other one was an engineer. Now, we know he was based in the UK, but we've never been, and we know he was based at 2 different airfields in his career, but we don't know what he did there because my dad cannot get his service records, and we know he existed because we have his roll number. But whenever we look him up, he doesn't exist. Now, we know he did. Now, interestingly enough, a psychic said to me, well, I think he was to do with downed aircraft. He would be going out there to retrieve them, to retrieve the engineering, hence very secret. And one of the places he was at, when I did a little bit of looking into it for my dad, they did do stuff like that there. So there's still a lot of stuff that is still under lock and key that is gradually being released. David O'Keefe, he's a Canadian history professor. He released a book on Dieppe a few years ago. I interviewed him sometime last year, and it took him nearly 20 years to finish this book because research was literally being released as he was writing that explained the raids at Dieppe. So that's what I'm saying with World War II. There's still an awful lot coming out, and that's just on the Allied side. And
Arnside Street, Penny.
Sorry,
I don't know if I pronounced this right. Arnside Street, London.
sounds about right. I know it existed, and I know it got bombed, and I know it was fire damage, and a lot of records got destroyed. So, but also the other amazing thing is people have stored stuff in their lofts. People have stored stuff in. I mean, my husband's found stuff and used to do loft conversions. He found it was the minutes for the British Legion from about 1919 to 1920 something. The minute boots, and he found that. So there's things like that people are gradually finding, like pilots' logbooks and all these kind of things, which is why I'm saying that there's stuff out there that we probably will keep finding as houses are renovated, as people go through suitcases.
Yeah, that's true.
All that kind of thing. And that's what's so amazing. And that's why you never stop researching. I do understand what Vaughn was saying about the POW thing, because I know when I used to live in Norwich many years ago, one of my then boyfriends and mine's friends ran a market stall, and we used to meet him on a Saturday and go to the market traders pub. And there was a chap in there who he said, he fought in World War II. He was a Japanese POW. Now, Norwich used to have an awful lot of Far Eastern visitors. I can't remember why. There was a reason. They were Japanese, Taiwanese, all that kind of thing. If any of them accidentally walked in the pub, this was like the market traders pub, but it wasn't, if that makes sense.
Right.
But they used their pub.
Just
if anyone walked in who was Far Eastern, this guy had he would obviously have very, very severe PTSD from it. He would break down. He would either go into trying to attack them, and we're talking like 17-year-old children here. He would either try and attack them, or he would literally go into the fetal position. And it was what he'd suffered in a Japanese POW camp. Now, he would never talk about it, but we all knew that was his trigger. And he obviously had very, very severe untreated PTSD from it. So there's, and it's a shame that people they're not able to tell their stories to people, because we need to know them to stop it happening.
Yeah, that's right.
I think a lot of it comes out when they have something like dementia or Alzheimer's, and I only know that through experience because I had 2 residents when years and years ago that were part of the war, and if I can remember rightly, the guy was 102.
Yeah.
And he was so hard to work with. No hard him, because he used to get so distressed you couldn't touch him. If you put a cloth, he's trying to batter your hands, and you could hear some of the things that he was crying out. And he was a prisoner of the war, and he was crying out during the night, and I felt so sorry for him, but there was just nothing you could do to comfort him. That was him.
My day job is in the care industry, although I do work on the financial services side. And a few years ago, I met a lady who was in Auschwitz, and she still had the number tattoo.
Yeah, my ex's granddad did.
Yeah. And meeting someone like that, now she wasn't just in Auschwitz; she escaped from Auschwitz.
Oh my god!
She wasn't. She was Polish. She wasn't actually Jewish. She was Polish. Oh, and Mark, I know that I haven't forgotten about your Hopton Heath query you sent me. I'm getting round to it, I promise. He asked me to. I said I'd look something up for him, and I just haven't got around to doing it yet.
Oh, bless you.
I'm a bit preoccupied with kids, work, that kind of thing.
It's that way, doesn't it?
It's on my to-do list, Mark, I promise. What was I going to say? Yes, so she was Polish, but when at the beginning of the war, the Russians originally took all the Polish men because they were scared they were going to fight against them when the Russians were still on the German side. I'm simplifying this to anyone who knows this in depth, so otherwise it's 2 hours to go through it all. And he was taken off to one of the gulags. She found out shortly after he'd left she was newly pregnant. She got taken by the Germans to go into a work camp, not a concentration camp, the work camps early on. She ran away from, it was about 5 or 6 of them. So they gradually were putting her in worse and worse ones. She ended up in Auschwitz. as the worst one. So she wasn't there as a concentration camp. She was there for the workers' camps, which they were still treated pretty bad.
Yeah.
They didn't actually get put into the gas chambers so much. But then when the Allies were turning up, they took them on the death marches to get rid of as many of them as possible. And she escaped on the death march. She ran and managed to escape and got home. And her little girl, I think was it a boy? Can't remember now whether it was a boy or a girl she'd literally left the baby in the crib in the kitchen when she'd been taken, like 5-month-old baby. Her neighbours had taken the baby, taken it out to rural Poland to be protected. She came back and they brought the baby back for her. So she thought she'd lost her child. Her child.
Oh, my God.
No, listen, it gets even better than that. She thought her husband was obviously dead because if the Russians hadn't killed him, the Germans probably had. She decided to make them to sort of leave Poland because now it was under control of the Russians. She went to Paris. First, Red Cross gave her a parcel, and this parcel had this dried fruit in it. And the only person who knew she liked this dried fruit was her husband. She asked where the fruit came from. They said, your husband sent it. Her husband had been released when the Russians released loads of men because they realised when they swapped sides and they realised they needed them to fight the Nazis. He had a pilot's license. He'd gone to England to fly Lancasters, survived the whole war flying Lancasters, which statistically is an anomaly. And he was still alive. And so they were reunited in London with a newborn, with a baby and her husband.
Mind blowing.
And this is a true story. This isn't. I'm not making this.
That is awesome.
True story.
That's amazing.
So,
this is why I love working with the elderly, because some of the stories that you hear back then, you know, coming from their accounts and what they've been through, I'm just thinking, oh my God, I could sit and listen to them for hours.
Well, she couldn't tell me that she'd had a very bad stroke and she had vascular dementia as a result of the stroke. It was her son who told me the story, but she still knew enough who she was. And when I sort of shook her hand and said, "You're amazing. You're you know, you'd look at this woman of 90 odd and not think what she'd been through, and meeting her and getting to shake her hand and seeing, I mean, I've got tattoos, but seeing that number, the famous number on her arm, I actually had shivers go up my spine because it's the first time I'd ever met anyone who actually had the Auschwitz tattoo.
I didn't realise. I didn't even know about the tattoos until I met my ex's grandfather, and I saw it on his wrist.
Yeah.
And I sort of asked my ex what it was, or I actually, sussed out what it was. And oh, gee, no, obviously, no, it was obvious what it was. Yeah.
Some of them did try and remove theirs, but a lot of people kept them as a kind of remember of what they'd been through. I mean, obviously, so many people didn't leave Auschwitz and places like that. But yeah, she escaped whilst on one of the death marches. But to find out her husband, who she thought had been dead, had actually survived flying Lancasters. He'd gone over it hopefully to be a Spitfire pilot, but they said, no, we need Lancaster pilots. Now, flying Lancasters, when you look at the statistics of how many, it was not a high survival rate, shall we say, flying the bombers or being on the bombers. And he managed to survive that and then just sent this parcel in the hope that his wife was still alive. I actually cried. As I walked away from it, I did actually cry with the whole sort of how amazing it all was. And that is why I love history, because for every horrible, horrible story you get, you can find that, and you can find this amazing sense of survival. And it's also pretty why I like the paranormal side, because in a way, these spirits are surviving. They're surviving to try and tell you their story. They're surviving to contact you. And that's why I'm not scared. And that's also why if I can validate stuff, whether they are spirits or whether it is one of the theories I spoke to Nick Groff about once, we were saying, because time isn't linear. Is it where the timeline's bent back and it's so thin, you can almost, that's why you're seeing things happening, because it's time almost touching and all that. Right. Even still, shouldn't we share this stuff? Shouldn't we tell these accounts?
It's an experience I've had, and I'd like to know if this person existed. But I've not got a lot to go on. But I'll have to see if I can do something, because I think he was either a disabled child or illegitimate child of the aristocracy.
Mm.
So if that's the case, would there be a record?
Depends when. Depends
Yeah.
when. If it was a disabled child of the aristocracy,
Yeah,
they did try and hide them a
he
bit. I mean,
was.
you
That's
know,
what I picked up on.
yeah, people criticised the Victorians for the asylums and stuff, but they were actually trying to do a good thing with those. They just didn't have the medical knowledge that we do now.
Yeah, that's right.
So it really depends on where I'm just reading the thing from Cliff saying about how we owe a great debt to the Poles and the Czechs. Yes, we
All
do.
right, I'll just get that one up then.
Yes, we do. I agree 100%.
Where are we? Yeah, found it.
Yeah. We do.
That's it.
We do for sure. I mean, it really annoys me when people say about the British pilots in the Battle of Britain. Even though the fighter side isn't what I'm particularly interested, I'm more interested in the bombers. When you go to somewhere like any of the Battle of Britain museums, and they'll show you the nationalities of all the pilots. I mean, the fact that with like downed pilots, because, and I know they do this scene in the film The Battle of Britain, and even though it's a kind of a parody, it's true that you'd get these foreign pilots downed who didn't speak English, and the locals would assume that they were Germans because they didn't speak English. And they got attacked and everything. So yes, we owe. I mean, the fact we had and this was one of the experience I had at the Haunted Antique Centre. I don't know if you remember, a Norwegian pilot who was one of the Great Escape people comes through. And you know, we had Norwegian pilots, we had Dutch pilots, we had Polish pilots, we had every nationality who didn't agree with Nazism escaped
Yeah,
and flew for it and fought for us and flew for us. And I don't think we do pay enough respect to everyone who fought.
yeah. There's a guy who used to come in my pub, and he was Polish, and he came to England because of the war
mm,
and everything, and you know they wouldn't let him home,
mm,
you know, because of you know, and
yeah,
that was it. He'd made his choice, and he was such a lovely bloke, you
yeah.
know, and it's shocking.
There was an awful lot of displacement, though. An
Yeah, there
awful
are
lot.
issues with the families, his family as well over it and everything.
I mean, I can't quite remember the intricacies of it because, like I say, I haven't sort of read up on it recently. But there
Yeah,
was an awful them that lost their nationalities due to
you did, yeah,
Nazism, and then were homeless refugees. They had nowhere. I mean,
yeah.
you take the sort of Jewish communities who, when they were released from the camps,
Oh,
they had no properties, they had no nationality anymore, they
shocking.
had nowhere to go, and that is really kind of, you know, I mean,
And people don't even think about that side of things, do they?
no,
You know, obviously nowadays things like this, well, not people like leave their homes for whatever reason and then turn up with nothing, and obviously it's happening all the time.
yeah.
But you don't think in history, you know, this happened during the war, didn't it? And yeah, it's
Well,
just
the
yeah,
attacks on Jewish communities has been happening since the 12th and 13th century. So
yeah,
it really is, if not before then. But it's that kind of homelessness, that displacement, that you know
yeah,
you've lived in that you've lived, born third generation, etc., and then you're told, no, you don't belong here anymore. You're
yeah,
not, you know, you've got bad blood or whatever. I just,
yeah.
yeah,
It's not.
I have a lot of admiration for an awful lot of people who I don't know by name. I just
Yeah,
know what they did. And
yeah.
um but like I said at the beginning about the Greek Civil War, that was something that shocked me recently, to find out that the British supported the right wing
Mm,
Greek dictatorship.
yeah.
I wouldn't have known that either, to be fair,
I
Penny.
wouldn't have done
I
either.
didn't until I found it. I found it out today,
God,
writing a piece, and I was quite like, I never knew that. I found that really shocking, that these people who had fought for the Greek resistance to try and beat the Nazis were then the criminals because they were left wing. I mean,
no.
yeah.
It's
Now
mad,
as
isn't it?
queer as folk. What can I say?
That's
Oh, aye,
it,
that's
isn't it?
it. That
I've
is it.
got Craig Stevens. He's planning to do a trip next few years to the warfields of Europe and the Civil War.
Mm,
Just fascinated to see what energy's left behind.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's actually something I've been thinking about. We don't hear about many World War One and World War Two ghosts. I'm, it's something I was thinking about today, actually, when my mind was drifting. Lots of paranormal experiences from World War One that I can talk about, but you don't tend to hear of many hauntings.
Well,
And
believe it or not, since we're on this subject, on Saturday, the castle that we were at, when I met up with two of my teammates, Jack, I actually meant to tell you this, right? Was that I kept getting visions of World War Two, and I couldn't understand why. I just getting visions of World War Two and like sort of some nip clips, and I'm thinking to myself, World War Two, and I kept saying to the lasses, I said, that castle was just not a castle. This was in relation to something with the World War Two. I don't know what it is, but I need to challenge it. And I felt like I couldn't hear it like one of my ears. And so we did AVPs, things were shooting backwards and forwards. And halfway through the night, I said to the group, I said, this is really bugging me, and I'm going to go out my zone and research this, because do you know what? This is bugging me, and I need clarity, because I'm like a dog with a bone. See, if I say something and I say it and I don't get that clarification, but it's been bugging me all night, I've got to go and research it. And it turned out it was to do with World War Two. It was it used to be basically for evacuated children who were deaf and dumb. I know that's not the right propaganda to use, the PC word,
Yeah.
but that's basically what it was for. And it was amazing, because I was like, oh right, that gives me clarification.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've found World War Two and World War One type hauntings in the UK, like visiting places like Landguard Fort, Harwich Redoubt, all those kind of things. But I'm talking about people don't report seeing soldiers walking across the battlefields and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Somme. I mean, I had a very weird experience when I visited. I had quite a few when I visited Normandy. One of them was actually at Point du Hoc, which is one of the cliffs that I think it was the Americans got on D-Day. And I wrote a blog about it on my website. But it's more the fact you don't tend to hear about people saying they've seen soldiers walking across an old battlefield, and that's what I mean by the hauntings. That the hauntings seemed, but I do wonder if that's because the French don't seem to be as into paranormal as we are, for example.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's why they don't get reported, because there's a very, very, and it was when I talked to this chap, David O'Keefe, that I mentioned earlier, the Canadian historian, about Dieppe, and it was about a very, very specific haunting where the Battle of the Dieppe landings took place that the SPR actually investigated, but it was English people who reported it. So it is interesting, and it does make me wonder if things are going on constantly, and because people don't want to see it, they don't see it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
They don't
that's
want to know
it.
about it. But I agree with you. I mean, there's, especially in Scotland. Scotland was very well utilised for World War Two because you were so close to the North Sea and you were protecting those routes.
Yeah.
And obviously, aircraft could take off from there to get out into the Atlantic and get out to the North
Yeah,
Sea, and
that's
all
true.
that kind of thing. So yeah, you were very well utilised up north.
Aye. Definitely.
So Mark, the RAF people seen where he works. They built bombers on the site in World War Two.
Ooh, do you know what type of bombers, Mark? That'd be interesting. As I'm
Yeah.
a bomber girl, as I call it. I'm not one of those ones who's into all the fighters. I'm into the bombers. I just find them absolutely fascinating, and I think, yeah, the fact that you've got these pilots who are like 21, 22 years old, and they're responsible for 8 or 9 men's lives. It's kind of actually even younger than that. The youngest co-pilot I found was 18, and he was a pilot on one of the big bombers, in British bombers.
Wow.
So yeah, I find anything like that. I just enjoy. Not enjoy. That's the wrong word. I value
Yeah.
learning about it.
Okay.
Yeah. I can wax lyrical about this kind of thing all night. How long you got?
Another 10 minutes, Penny.
Yeah, got a comment. A big believer in reincarnation. Frequently get images of being around in Cromwell's time and being in his army riding a horse. Any of you guys had any experience or feelings of a past life?
I'm
Great
not
question.
sure about past life. I have like deja vu of places that I know I've never visited before. I remember once on a school trip we got let off. I think it was in Lincoln. I think I was in Lincoln, and
Yeah.
the group I was with, they got lost, and I found our way back to where we were supposed to go, and I'd never been there before.
Wow. Yeah.
So, and knowing what's going to be around the next corner, even though, and this
Yeah.
obviously before Google Maps and everything
Yeah,
else,
that's it.
back in the dark ages. We had electricity then, but just, I'd know what was around what's around the next corner, or things like that. I get those quite a lot. But I don't know about. I'd like to think reincarnation is real, because that would explain when you get someone who's quite young but seems to have knowledge that they shouldn't have at their age, that they're quite a long way through the reincarnation process. That's the way I've always thought about it. Blenheims and Beaufort. I can't think what the other bit goes with the Beaufort bit is off the top of my head. Lysanders were kind of transport. Well, they weren't mega transport. I think they could have 4 people in. Lizzies, they were affectionately known as. But they could land on a very short strip of land, the Lizzies. But yes, Blenheims were a nice one. My favourite are Lancasters and Mosquitoes. They're my favourite bombers, for anyone who knows what I'm talking about. Although I'm very partial to the American Liberator as well, the B-24, which is what Jimmy Stewart flew during World War II.
Wow.
But yeah, I don't know about if I've got I can think of any past lives or whatever. There's certain time periods I'm attracted to, but I find the more I learn, the more time periods I get attracted to. So
Yeah.
it's just never ending. It's almost like when someone says, "Can you research this period?" And I'm like, "Oh no, it's another one that's gonna. Oh, my head can't take anymore."
Oh, bless you.
But I always do.
No, it's brilliant what you do.
Oh, thank you.
You know, when you investigate,
Mm-hmm.
do you specifically see the history, then choose a location? Or do you go to a location, then look at the history after?
Actually, both. There's some places that I'll know the history of and I really want to investigate it.
Yeah.
But normally, because there's a bit of a pull, something is shouting at me to go. It's not, I mean, I wouldn't just read the history of a place and then say, yeah, I'll go and investigate there. It's more if I've read the history and there's something in my head telling me there's more to learn. I can't explain it. It's like a sort of psychic thing. But some places, when I've been asked to go along as a guest or whatever, I don't necessarily know the history. And I don't tend, unless I've been asked to look it up to do a talk, I tend to only look up a few little bits, like key things that I can use as triggers. So, for example, when the building was built, for example, who the monarch was,
that's it.
time, maybe what it had been used for in the past, so that I can ask those as kind of trigger questions when I'm trying to get a response. But I won't do the sort of 4 or 5 hour research that I would do when I'm researching. Well, I actually do nearer 250 for a book, but 4 or 5 hours if I was researching a specific location because I was going to give a big talk on it, for example. So yes to both of those, but I don't, if I'm going to a place that I've just been asked to visit, I don't tend to learn everything I can possibly learn about it. I tend to wait until I go away, write things down, and then see if I can find stuff out that correlates. But I normally, I mean, the problem is when you've done this for as long as I have, it's very unusual to go somewhere where you haven't already got a bit of an idea. So, I can normally look at a building and tell you roughly when it would have been built just by looking at it. Or if you say, this was turned into a house after the Reformation, that means I know that it was late. It was in the 1500s.
That's it.
But that's just sort of just general knowledge. But it's both, probably. There have been places that I've read about that I've thought, I would, and done shows on, and on Haunted Histories podcasts on, that I'm just like, one day I've got to get in there because it's pulling me like crazy.
That's brilliant.
Other places I've researched and I've thought, it'd be nice to visit, but
Yeah. I do like the talk you did on the Spitfire Girls.
Thank you. I
That
enjoyed
was,
that.
it's a talk Penny did at the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre. And it's lovely. And you don't realise the details behind anything, do you? You know, and it's the fact that you brought that to life, that this actually happened.
I hope so. And that's why I like doing the talks that I do, because what people don't realise is I don't give you everything that I know when I do a talk. It's not everything. It's what I think will maybe stimulate your interest, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then afterwards you can sort of check it out further, can't you?
Because the last thing I want to do is bombard people with all the information and then not have any foundations, so to speak. So the Spitfire one, the one thing I think I said I wanted you guys to take away from that is it wasn't just women flying for the ATA. There were men who'd basically been told you're either too old, too disabled, or whatever. You can't fly.
But then you picked up on that Lancaster bomber guy. So was he doing that?
No, that was he was a Spitfire pilot, the one who escaped. The Per the photo that Louise Dixon got of a bloke standing behind me, and he told us the date he died, his wife's name, and all of this checked out. All of it checked out. There was only 3 guys who actually managed to escape with the true Great Escape, and he was one of them. Where he came from, why he attached him. The only reason I can think he attached himself to me is he was based at North Weald Airfield, which is quite near me, and I've been there quite a few times.
Yeah.
And actually, before lockdown, they discussed me doing an investigation there. So I'm wondering if that's why he kind of attached himself to me. He'd been waiting to talk. I don't know. But that's still kind of that was one that you were saying, if I've been shocked when I'm researching. I've written down these details thinking, it's just a Ouija board, it's not doing anything. Then when I found the photo of him and compared it to the photo Louise had got, I was like, okay, that's quite close. And then when I think we said, when did you die? And he said 6'9", and we assumed that meant either 1969 or at 69. No, he died June the 9th, 06, 09. His wife's name was Margaret. He'd told her name was Peg. What's Peggy short for? Margaret.
Wow. My God.
So there was things like that came out that when I researched the information afterwards, because I didn't know any of this, I was I must admit, when you go that hot and cold sort of realization, I'm like, oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
That was kind of, that left me cold in a good way. In a good way. I haven't seen him since. He hasn't made an appearance since. So obviously he wanted to let me know he was there.
He got his message out and he got acknowledged, didn't he?
But it was the 6'9" was the one that really got me. It really got me because that's pretty specific.
Yeah.
And the photo as well. And I found a photo of him sort of I think he was in his 70s when he died. When I found a photo of him older and compared it to the picture that Louise had got, it was uncanny. And we did. I know that Neil went back and tried to recreate that picture with everything that was in that room, and he couldn't.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow.
But not scared, but kind of like. Speechless. Even me, speechless.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I want to thank you. We're going to have to finish, but I just want to thank you. It's just been fantastic.
I've really enjoyed myself, Penny. Thank you.
Brilliant. And I want to thank everybody who's watched. I didn't get round to saying a lot of hellos earlier, and I'm sorry, but...
And I do apologise, I keep turning my camera off and that, but I'm sure you don't want to watch me blowing my nose and rubbing my eyes and everything, so,
Oh dear, but thanks everyone for watching, and look after yourselves. And
thanks
everybody.
Penny.
You're brilliant. And so once again, the book.
The new one.
The
Battle of Bosworth Hall. It will be due out in March. My little friend Mark Dudley's just popped up there. Hello, Mark.
Oh, hello, Mark.
We were being nice about you earlier. It's due out in March. If you want a signed copy, hot off the press, get yourself a day ticket for the Festival of the Unexplained at Bosworth Hall. I will be there on the Saturday. I am actually not going to be around on the Sunday. Children and everything, I'll be going home on the Sunday morning. But I will be there on the Saturday, and I'll be kicking off proceedings with the first talk, as far as I know. And I suppose things could change, but that's what I've been told at the moment. If you want any of my 3 books, so Paranormal Playtime, A Haunted Experiment, I have to remember them now, My Haunted History, you can get them direct from me, signed copies if you want one, or off Amazon. Yeah, and I have a new podcast, a new episode of Haunted History should be out. I'll be at the weekend, I think. And so head on over to the Haunted Histories page to keep an eye on things. I think
I will try and update all the shows, so you'll get a link to Penny with the Haunted Histories and the books and things like that. So it will be there for when you look at it sort of afterwards. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And yeah, it's just been wonderful. And okay, we've heard about the war, but for you to sort of bring in these little stories, it's just amazing.
Thank you.
It's so moving as well. Oh wow.
I ain't going to change. I'll always be like this.
Oh no, that's lovely though, isn't it? It's brilliant. But yeah, if only you were a history teacher, everybody would be doing history.
Yeah, I do. Do you know what? You're not the first person to suggest that. If I was allowed to teach what I wanted to teach, I could teach it.
Yeah.
I couldn't be told what to teach.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Yeah.
The way they have to teach some of it is so boring.
Yeah, that's right.
No, I do actually. I have actually been into my son's middle school and done a few talks for them on World War One, World War Two, Henry VIII, and Chelmsford. So I have gone in and done a few things like that. But if I can get people who left school 20 years ago and thought history was boring to actually say, actually, no, it's quite cool.
I like that. 20 years ago, yeah. We'll stick on that.
It's longer ago than I left school. And do you know what? I'll tell you this before we leave, because this will make people laugh. I failed history A level, and yet I'm still doing history now. So
there you go then.
There you go.
But thanks so much. Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you.